all broken. What the f have you...
Oh shit. I got it, Chef, I got it. Slow down.
Those are some of the most popular savage moments of all time. But let's discuss the ones that truly deserve a spot on this list. Let's start off with Season 12, Episode 14, where the kitchen reached a boiling point as sous chef Andy unleashed her fury on one of the chefs who crossed the line, sparking one of the most intense moments of the season. Here's the lowdown. Anton found himself in a tight spot after completely botching his Wellingtons, a critical mistake in any kitchen, let alone one under this much pressure. The tension that had been simmering all night suddenly erupted into a full-blown explosion when Andy, unable to tolerate the incompetence any longer, jumped into the fray to set things straight. But here's where it really got interesting. Instead of owning up to his mistakes and working to fix them like any professional should, what did Anton do?
Obviously, I screwed it up with the oven. Next door's oven, I got it down pat. This one, I screwed it up.
He started throwing out excuse after excuse. Can you even believe that? At a time when he should have been stepping up, he was dodging responsibility left and right. For someone of his age, supposed maturity, and level of experience in the kitchen, you'd expect a much better response, right? You could practically see the disbelief on everyone's faces. Honestly, I was taken aback by his reaction. Just imagine how Chef Andy must have felt, watching this lackluster performance unfold in front of her. It's one thing to make a mistake, but to not even try to own it?
Stop yelling at me. I've told them 14 minutes.
This oven you said is 14 minutes?
Oh, did you catch that moment? Andy was definitely not about to let this slide. She was clearly prepared for a confrontation, practically bracing herself for the showdown that was about to happen. But Anton just couldn't keep his attitude in check.
Some little girl get in my face, start ripping a new ass because you got issues.
The atmosphere in the kitchen became incredibly tense. It was a bad look all around as things got seriously heated between Anton and his mentor. Andy, who had been holding on to her patience by a thread, finally hit her breaking point. You could almost see the exact moment she decided she'd had enough.
I was just saying that this way I was showing.
Stop talking back.
And oh boy, did she let loose. Andy didn't just express her frustration, she unleashed it with the force of a hurricane. Picture this. Andy storming right up to Anton, getting so close to his face that you could practically feel the intensity radiating off of her, and then letting out a scream that could wake the dead. I'm not sure how you envisioned it, but in reality, it was pure, unfiltered chaos in that kitchen.
Chef.
Don't you fucking talk back to me! Don't you ever talk back to me! Yes, you are! Pull it together!
It was as if she was laying down the law with a megaphone, and there was no mistaking who was in charge. And let me tell you, that authoritative yes, chef she forced out of him probably echoed all the way to the next town over.
Shut up and say yes, chef!
Yes, chef.
When Chef Ramsay reaches his boiling point, it's like he transforms into a completely different person. And that person? Well, let's just say he's nothing short of a savage. This reminds me of a wild episode from Season 10 of Hell's Kitchen, where one of the teammates made a snarky comment that even 5 monkeys could have done a better job than Brian. Now, while the accuracy of that number might be up for debate, Brian went absolutely bananas during this dinner service. Brian was paired up with Patrick, and the two were tasked with handling the fish station. And things took a turn for the worse when Brian sent out a plate of raw cioppino, which didn't sit well with Clemenza, especially since it wasn't exactly the most complicated dish to get right.
The red team is still waiting on Danielle.
Luckily, Brian managed to nail it on his second try, and even passed the refire, which was a small victory in an otherwise chaotic night. On the entree front, Brian seemed determined to prove that he was the boss at the fish station. But his plans quickly fell apart when Chef Ramsay discovered that the cod he served was raw. And as you might have guessed, this discovery didn't go over well at all.
It's very nice, that risotto.
Now, if there's one thing I know, it's that even the pickiest of cats would turn their noses up at undercooked fish. Brian was already kicking himself for the mistake, but Ramsay decided to take it up a notch and do something totally unexpected. In a move that left no room for confusion about who was screwing up, Chef Ramsay tossed a piece of that undercooked cod right at Brian, making it crystal clear who was responsible for the fiasco at the fish station that night. While Brian was still trying to wrap his head around what had just happened, Justin jumped in to take over the fish station, hoping to salvage the situation. But when Justin arrived, he discovered that the refired fish had been burned to a crisp, adding insult to injury and wasting even more food, which only served to annoy everyone in the kitchen.
It's raw cat food. Stop, will you?
And honestly, I couldn't agree more. It was just a mess all around. As if one burnt piece of cod wasn't bad enough, Brian managed to ruin the last one of the night as well.
What's going on?
What's going on?
That's burnt.
By this point, Chef Ramsay was absolutely fuming and couldn't help but demand to know what the heck Brian was doing. But he also had to figure out a solution on the fly. That's when Chef Ramsay turned to James and suggested that they serve sea bass as an alternative to the affected customers. Just as Chef Ramsay barked out the revised order, Brian responded with a rather cheesy comment that didn't exactly help his case. And that's when we learned the hard way that Chef Ramsay has a trigger word. In no mood for pleasantries, Ramsay quickly snapped back at Brian, effectively shutting down any chance of camaraderie.
Got a pilot here, and that's where he was, about that far under pilot.
But Chef Ramsay wasn't done yet. Oh no, he had one last move to make. He swiftly kicked Brian out of the kitchen, but not before delivering one final cutting remark.
How's that cod going, Brian?
And as Brian made his exit, Chef Ramsay asked a question that many Redditors have been asking about me.
I ran out of cod.
And just like Brian's clownish antics, I'm absolutely here for all the funs and laughs. Next up on the list is a moment when sous chef Scott just couldn't hold back his frustration with a contestant who made the mistake of crossing him.
Jason made me look stupid for no reason.
This dramatic scene happened in Season 7, Episode 12. Chef Ramsay had to step out of the kitchen for a bit, so he left sous chef Scott in charge. That's when things started to heat up. Enter Benjamin Knack, who must have been feeling pretty confident because he decided to take matters into his own hands. He tried to take over Scott's role by calling out the next order himself, thinking he could run the show.
Call me out because I didn't talk enough?
Unfortunately for Benjamin, that didn't sit well with Chef Scott at all. In fact, it made him absolutely furious.
If you don't like that, then Jay, you just don't like it.
I don't like it.
Well, fuck.
Scott was practically fuming, and he let Benjamin know exactly how he felt about it. Scott didn't waste any time. He immediately confronted Benjamin, calling him out for thinking he could take charge. Benjamin, realizing he'd overstepped, wisely decided to back down. But Scott wasn't finished. Oh no, he wasn't even close to letting it go. He got right up in Benjamin's face, just inches away, and really let him have it. It was like watching a pressure cooker release all that built-up steam. And wow, the lesson was clear. Messing with Chef Scott is a bad idea. But you know that old fable about the boy who cried wolf? Well, funny enough, it reminds me of something that happened on the show. Oh wait, I think the boy's name was Jared.
I spoke to the medic. Jared, he couldn't find the cut.
So, picture this. It was the middle of the chaos during Italian night, and Jared found himself working the garnish station. And things were already hectic when Van and Giovanni sent up a raw lamb, and Jared must have thought these guys couldn't cook lamb to save their lives, even if they had a step-by-step guide in front of them. With the orders for garnish piling up like an avalanche, Jared looked like he was wishing he had a couple of clones to help out. He was frantically trying to get the blue team through the mess. It was almost funny to watch him try to herd them all together. But oh, the drama didn't end there. So Jared, in a moment of brilliance, decided to play the boy who cried wolf card. He called out for a medic, claiming he'd gotten a pretty bad cut on his finger. But as we all know, Chef Ramsay doesn't fall for tricks that easily. The way he shut Jared down was nothing short of savage. You've got to see it for yourself.
You've got a bigger cut on the end of your emergency.
Oh, and just for the record, no egos were harmed during the making of Jared's overly dramatic meltdown. So, did Jared learn his lesson? Of course not. He came back all bandaged up, strutting around like he was some kind of warrior, proud of his little battle scar. Chef Ramsay, never missing a beat, joked that maybe instead of a bandage, Jared should focus on growing a backbone.
17.
0, chef.
Hey, do me a favor.
Yes, chef.
Grow some.
Yes, chef.
And it was classic Ramsay. So, just before Chef Ramsay kicked the blue team out of the kitchen, he decided to get to the bottom of the whole cut caper situation. He called in the medic to find out what was really going on. And guess what he discovered? There was no cut. Shocking, right? Well, not really. We all saw that one coming from a mile away. But honestly, what really gets me every time is the narrator's line about Jared being in triage fighting for his life. That line is just too funny. Even while defending himself, Jared was adamant that he had blood all over his hands. I mean, can you believe he was still sticking to that BS story? Especially since Chef Ramsay had already spoken directly to the medic and knew the truth. Even after all this time, people still can't forget Jared's over-the-top acting. So, speaking of savage post-elimination comments, there was another gem after DeMarco's exit in Season 12.
DeMarco, demented, demoted, denied.
I have to say, I love a good bit of alliteration. And Chef Ramsay's comment was just perfect. It was effortless. effective, efficient. Couldn't have put it better myself. If you remember, unlike Jared, DeMarco actually did slice his finger while cutting potatoes no less. The cut was so bad that he had to be rushed to urgent care. Honestly, ever since I saw that, I've become seriously paranoid of mandolin slicers. Those things are like tiny kitchen nightmares waiting to happen. Those slicers are pure evil. Actually, that gives me an idea. How about I put together a compilation of Chef Ramsay's most brutal post-elimination quotes? If you're into that, let me know in the comments below. Oh, and speaking of savage moments, you can see how bad things were.
Wrong time! Get out! Jackass waving at them!
And then, Chef Ramsay just snapped. He went full-on ballistic.
Wave about! I don't care! Get out!
And wow, that had to hurt. Bobby definitely felt the sting of that one. A lot of people think Chef Ramsay has softened up in recent seasons, maybe because he's getting older, but seriously, tell me that this moment wasn't peak Ramsay.
Matthew, at Signature Dish, you delivered me a dish full of shit.
In season 20, Chef Ramsay didn't even let Matthew plead his case, just flat out refused and eliminated him on the spot, calling him the worst performer out of all the young guns. Brutal, right? So, how did it all go so wrong for Matthew? Let's break it down. First off, Matthew was up against Keanu in the Signature Dish Challenge. The pressure was on, big time. Everyone was watching, and he had just 45 minutes to whip up a perfect cioppino, a pretty tough dish to nail. When it was time to present his dish, Matthew tried to impress Chef Ramsay by talking about his experience making food videos and being a hands-on guy. But Chef Ramsay wasn't buying it. In fact, he even threw a little shade his way with a joke.
Bring flavor today that I didn't focus enough on.
It was all downhill from there. Even though Matthew thought he'd nailed his cioppino, Chef Ramsay quickly spotted a major issue.
Eating shrimp and the shit sack.
Oh no.
And it became clear Matthew had pulled an Elise by leaving the shrimp's poop sack in the dish. Big no-no. Chef Ramsay wasn't pleased, obviously, and asked Matthew why he hadn't cleaned the shrimp properly. And get this, Matthew said he didn't even realize it was there. Chef Ramsay, feeling totally insulted, offered Matthew a taste of the sack, but Matthew wisely declined. So yeah, Matthew basically served Chef Ramsay literal shit, unintentionally of course, but still, it was still shit.
You now legal to drink, but were you actually drunk when you put this dish together?
No, sir.
And you could see just how badly that mistake had blown up in his face. And to top it all off, Chef Ramsay only gave him 2 points for his dish. Ouch, that one's gonna leave a mark. So, moving on to the alcohol challenge, Matthew decided to go all out with a bourbon rub chicken and cream sauce. After his not-so-great performance in the Signature Dish Challenge, he was really determined to make a comeback and show what he could do. When the blue team was trying to figure out their top contenders, Jay gave a thumbs up to Matthew's dish, saying it was well done. So, Matthew made it into the blue team's top 3, and was the last one to face Chef Ramsay's judgment. But, as you might expect, Chef Ramsay couldn't shake the memory of the shrimp with the poop sack fiasco, and was hoping Matthew had improved. Matthew presented his bourbon-glazed chicken breast, which looked pretty rustic, but decent. It got some props for its presentation, but when Chef Ramsay cut into it, he found a major issue. It turned out the chicken was, yep, you guessed it, raw.
Pink chicken? Seriously?
No, chef. No, chef.
Can you imagine the embarrassment? The whole blue team was under the microscope, not just for their skills in the kitchen, but also for ensuring the quality of their dishes. Chef Ramsay's critique wasn't just about the food on the plate, it was a major hit on their overall ability to manage the entire dining experience. And just when things seemed like they couldn't get any worse, after Victoria served up some perfectly clean shrimp, Chef Ramsay took a playful jab at Matthew.
Shrimp are spotless, which is great. Routine.
Wait, did I say playful? Forget that. It was downright ruthless. Coming up next, during the 300th dinner service in Season 20, Episode 2, you've got him and Peyton teaming up at the meat station. Picture it. Chef Ramsay starts barking out orders in both kitchens. And this is like his last-ditch effort to show he's got what it takes to survive in Ramsay's kitchen. So, here's where things start to get interesting. He hands over a plate of lamb to Chef Ramsay, probably thinking he's done a decent job. But oh, Chef Ramsay wasn't about to let that plate go out to the customers. Nope. He had something else brewing in his mind. He decides to take the lamb down the line for everyone to feel. And you just know things are about to take a turn when he said this.
Jump in, someone. Without even looking, slicing, just touch that.
But wait, within the same breath, he switches it up and calls it raw. That's right, raw. And you can just tell Chef Ramsay was not happy in the slightest. But here's the kicker. Matthew is standing there with this big grin on his face, messing things up right in front of none other than Mike Tyson. Yeah, you heard that right. Mike Tyson. Talk about pressure.
Get a fucking grip a little bit.
And Chef Ramsay's frustration was evident when he shouted at them, trying to get them back on track. Now, fast forward to when they get a VIP order, and guess what? Neither he nor Peyton could remember what the order was. At this point, Chef Ramsay's jaw nearly hit the floor, and he couldn't believe what he was hearing. He even told them to apologize to Tyson.
Are you on there? Can you apologize, please?
Yes,
Hurry
Chef.
up, let's go.
Honestly, I can totally see Chef Ramsay from earlier seasons just ripping into them for this. But surprisingly, he went easy on them this time. Desperate to make sure the chicken was cooked just right, he even pulled out a digital thermometer to double check, which caught Trenton completely off guard. That raised a few eyebrows for sure. Then, things got even more chaotic. When Chef Ramsay asked how much time they needed to get the order out, Peyton and Antonio came up with two totally different answers. The confusion was real. Ramsay was on the brink of losing it. He ended up gathering the whole team in the pantry for a serious talk, and even mocked Matthew for one of his excuses.
Can't cook. In the storeroom, all of you. Have a little meeting.
By that point, the team had already lost the plot. The communication was so bad that Ramsay decided to kick the entire blue team out of the kitchen. During the eliminations, Ramsay found something pretty shocking.
And this. A fucking meat thermometer.
He waited for the perfect moment to reveal who it belonged to, and even with a tool like that in their hands, they still couldn't get the meat cooked properly all night. Eventually, Matthew became the team's first nominee, with Peyton and Jay not far behind. Ramsay didn't hold back, reminding Matthew of all his mistakes: uncleaned shrimp, raw chicken, and undercooked lamb. It was clear that Ramsay wasn't in the mood to listen to any excuses from someone like Matthew. There was no doubt in anyone's mind Matthew was the weakest link. But before he sent him packing, Ramsay threw in some parting advice.
This industry, get your shit together.
Yes, Chef.
And just when you thought it was over, there was even more.
Decide to cook protein, use it fucking properly. Good night.
At this point, you're just thinking, Chef, stop, he's already dead. Speaking of Ramsay, when he's not tearing into Hell's Kitchen contestants with his signature verbal smackdowns, he's out there putting his Twitter following to good use by roasting the daylights out of newbie cooks. These brave or maybe just clueless souls actually send him pictures of their culinary, creations. And let me tell you, Ramsay doesn't hold back. And trust me, his online roasts are just as brutal as anything he dishes out in the kitchen. Take, for instance, this one time when someone with the name Floptina had the nerve to show off their noodle dish. Ramsay went absolutely ballistic and fired back with, "I'm not sure what's more off-putting, your food or your toes. They're longer than your noodles." Yeah, I'm totally with Ramsay on this one. Those noodles and toes were a definite no-go. But Ramsay doesn't just stick to roasting online. He's got a bit of a softer side too, like when he played matchmaker for a guy named Siarizal Haji Ismail. Siarizal posted a pic of the breakfast he made for his wife, and Ramsay gave him a nod of approval. But let's be real, Ramsay isn't just about making noise on social media. Back in the summer of 2017, he decided to take his no-fear attitude to the wilds of the Florida Everglades. He teamed up with his son Jack and a seasoned python hunter named Kyle Peniston to film an episode of his show, The F Word with Gordon Ramsay. While they were out there, they managed to round up 3 huge Burmese pythons. Now, these snakes are pretty notorious for causing trouble in Florida, and the folks over at Florida Wildlife aren't exactly their biggest fans. But Ramsay didn't stop at just catching them. Oh no, after their python catching adventure, Ramsay did what he does best. He cooked up a feast using those massive snakes. And he did it all in a portable oven, out there in the wild. Seriously, the guy's a legend. Even the wild seems to recognize that he's the ultimate beast in the kitchen and beyond. Anyway, back to Hell's Kitchen, where we're about to dive into the epic disaster that was the opening service of Season 10.
Serious that you're an executive chef?
Yeah, Chef.
Let's be real for a second. How many of us are guilty of exaggerating a bit on our resumes, only to find ourselves in way over our heads once we're on the job? Well, if that's ever been you, then you're in good company with Tavon. He took exaggeration to a whole new level, and it came crashing down spectacularly in front of everyone. But of course, the drama didn't stop there. Chef Ramsay soon turned his attention to Justin, giving him a hard time about some seriously undercooked scallops.
Are they all broken? What the f***?
You can see Ramsay's frustration building. But here's the twist. It turns out those messed up scallops weren't even Justin's fault. They were Tavon's doing. Yeah, Tavon had absolutely butchered them. And you can see that moment.
Come here, you. Executive chef. Come here.
With Tavon's embarrassing performance, Ramsay couldn't help but sarcastically throw around Tavon's executive chef title. And honestly, who could blame him? And just when you think only Ramsay could be that savage, Tavon's teammates chime in with their own brutal eulogies for his disastrous efforts. You've got to hear those. But wait, it gets even more colorful. You won't believe this next jab. It's pure gold. And then, there's nothing that tops this final comparison. Seriously, you'd think we accidentally downloaded the wrong Ratatouille movie or something, right? So, Chef Ramsay keeps pressing Tavon for an explanation. But under all that pressure, Tavon just crumbles. He tries to give an excuse, but it's a weak one. You can catch that sad attempt.
Here.
I guess I froze,
Honestly, the guy was skating on some seriously thin ice here. And you know the saying, it's always better to offer no excuse than a bad one. That truth bomb hits hard.
What else do you want me to say?
You haven't even fucking defrosted.
But Tavon? He just laughed it off like it was no big deal. That really got under Chef Ramsay's skin, and you could see Ramsay was hitting his breaking point. Finally, he couldn't take it anymore and kicked Tavon out of the kitchen, sending him straight back to the dorms. But of course, Tavon didn't go quietly. He had a few choice words to share.
Ramsay, you're a fucking douchebag.
Now, have you ever heard of the Dunning-Kruger effect? It's kind of the opposite of imposter syndrome. And instead of doubting themselves, people with the Dunning-Kruger effect think way too highly of their abilities. Their overconfidence turns into ignorance. And you see this all the time, maybe even in your own workplace. Think about it. That super self-assured boss who's a little too oblivious, or that one coworker who thinks they're God's gift to the team. It's tough dealing with these folks because they're not exactly open to feedback. Anyway, Tavon was the obvious choice as the blue team's first nominee for elimination. When Chef Ramsay asked him to rate his performance in the kitchen, Tavon gave his answer. But Ramsay had his own take on that answer, and you've got to see this epic burn. Ouch, that one's gonna sting. Now here's another classic case of the Dunning-Kruger effect in action. And believe me, it's a doozy. Seriously? Let's see how that worked out. During this dinner service, Joy was in charge of the fish station alongside Nicole. Right from the start, the women got their first order, but things quickly got a little messy when Nicole seemed completely unsure about handling the scallops. Joy had to step in and remind her that, yeah, it was their job to get those scallops right. You could feel the tension rising when Nicole couldn't even remember the specifics of the order. You can catch that awkward moment.
What my talents are, the whole G.
Seeing how things were heading south fast, Joy decided to take control of the fish station and let Nicole handle her own tasks, thinking it would be better than babysitting her. Unfortunately, that move backfired big time. Joy ended up sending out scallops that were way overcooked. Talk about a facepalm moment.
For the records.
Well, Gora.
As the women scrambled to salvage their first table, Joy reached out to Nicole for a little backup. A little later, Joy noticed something was off. Nicole's scallops were burnt on one side. But despite this hiccup, Joy managed to get her own portions up to the pass. The problem was, Nicole was dragging her feet on getting the refire done, and it didn't go unnoticed by Chef Ramsay. The tension was at an all-time high, and Nicole finally just threw her hands up, declaring that she was officially done dealing with those tricky scallops. You can feel the frustration through the screen.
It's 45 minutes into dinner service, and not a single appetizer has left the kitchen.
But Chef Ramsay wasn't about to let her off the hook that easily. No way. He wasn't having it at all, and you can see him lay down the law.
Are having a difficult time getting on the same page.
How much longer?
And just when you think it can't get any worse, Nicole couldn't resist firing back with a little snark of her own. That comeback happened.
Because that's all you need to see are freaking scallops.
And honestly, what a baby move. So things started to unravel pretty quickly between Sandra and Joy when their communication just broke down completely. Sandra had promised Joy she'd let her know when she was ready to sear the scallops, but that plan went right out the window. With no signal from Sandra, Joy decided to take matters into her own hands and started searing the scallops on her own, without waiting for Sandra's go-ahead. Now, here's the kicker. Joy's scallops only needed 2 minutes of cooking time, but Sandra needed 5. This mismatch in timing didn't go unnoticed by Chef Ramsay, who didn't hold back and accused Joy of basically throwing in the towel. Joy tried to defend herself, but when Chef Ramsay asked her to repeat his order, she stumbled, and that was all it took to push her into an emotional breakdown. Meanwhile, Sandra wasn't exactly brimming with sympathy. Rochelle, on the other hand, tried to comfort Joy, But even then, Sandra refused to communicate with her. You can sense the tension.
Chef, I did not hear.
You didn't hear.
The communication is fucked
Communication.
Seeing the clash between them only escalate, Chef Ramsay stepped in, urging Joy and Sandra to bury the hatchet and actually start talking to each other. But even after Ramsay's plea for teamwork, Sandra went rogue and walked the risotto to the pass without even involving Joy or Nicole. This caused a whole new level of chaos, leading Nicole to suggest they just drop the lobster tail altogether. An exasperated Chef Ramsay put a stop to everything and called the trio to the front. He demanded to know how long it would take to cook a lobster tail. Joy, with all the confidence in the world, said she could get it done in just 45 seconds. Naturally, Chef Ramsay decided to put her to the test right then and there, and you could practically see Sandra's smug satisfaction.
Oh, Chef.
With the clock ticking and the pressure on, Jessica was feeling the heat, and Rochelle was practically wishing for that lobster tail to cook faster by sheer force of will. But when time ran out, Joy came up with a cold lobster tail. She tried to blame it on a communication breakdown, but Chef Ramsay wasn't having any of it.
Get out! I'm done.
Honestly, Chef Ramsay's sarcasm at that point could have rivaled Deadpool. It was that sharp. And the result? He promptly kicked Joy, Nicole, and Sandra out of the kitchen. That's the thing with Chef Ramsay. He expects people to live up to their words and actually deliver on what they promise. If you can't walk the talk, you better be ready to face the sharp edge of his insults. Now, did I miss your favorite Savage Hell's Kitchen moment? Let me know in the comments below. And before you leave, make sure to smack that like, subscribe, and turn on my post notifications. Also, don't forget to check out my latest video right here. It's even crazier.